So Daniel, you guys are maybe a little bit out on a limb. I don't think you're completely alone in the markets, but everybody's just kind of sitting back and saying, well, Fed sees transitory inflation, they want more data. They think that's what we're going to get. What about you?
I mean, yes, certainly they've been clear that, that they've been anticipating higher inflation and that they're going to kind of withhold judgment on it while the reopening's underway. They're calling it transitory for now. To us, we look at the data and I think it's quite clear, growth is very strong in the U.S. and, underlying measures of inflation, even those measured by some of the regional the Fed regional banks, underlying inflation, trim mean inflation, sticky inflation, all that's on the rise. We think that, ultimately the Fed can't ignore this for too long. Obviously, the big question for tomorrow is, do they start talking about tapering? I think it's been clear that they're going to initiate that discussion. I think there's a broader uncertainty as to whether we get a Fed that tries to stay dovish for a little too long, or whether they ultimately take a look at the data and say we need to move forward with our plans for tapering and ultimately normalization. We are of the view that for this latter scenario, so that means higher yields, higher real yields, and for us that means a dollar that should be better supported as we enter the second half of the year.
I think we can be pretty sure that all the reporters at the press conference are going to be asking Chair Powell, aren't you at least thinking about tapering, sir? And so can't even talk a little bit about it. And people might see that as hawkish. How much hawkishness do we have to hear from Powell to move the dollar?
Yeah, look, we think about the dollar with respect to Fed policy just through this rates dynamic. And again, we think there's upwards of 45 basis points on the 10-year yield from now till year end. We think the bulk of that comes through real yields. That could be multiple percentage points on the trade-weighted dollar. Now, on the question of Powell and how hawkish will he be, in recent weeks, he's already kind of set the expectations that, yes, they will start talking about tapering. So that's going to happen. I think we may be a little disappointed for more concrete expectations on exactly when that's going to happen. We think the kind of more talk about the specifics, that probably comes later on this year. So I think there will be enough ambiguity that the market may be still constrained to kind of the ranges and FX that we've been trapped in. Ultimately, though, we think that the dollar breaks higher, especially against other low-yielding currencies where central banks aren't as eager to start moving.
And Daniel, of course, that was our question of the day there. But the other flip side of this, the pair that we're watching really is dollar yuan. Does that mean we've passed the peak when it comes to RMB?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at our forecast, we're pretty flat on renminbi. We have a year-on target of 640. A little further out, maybe it creeps lower to 635. Look, I think the backdrop of gradually rising U.S. real yields will be a headwind for EM currencies, especially those that are relatively lower yielding in North Asia. But the backdrop for renminbi is pretty firm. It's just it'll be hard to perform against the dollar. So we're looking for a flat renminbi from here on out.
What about dollar euro? Do you expect some momentum to be injected back into that trade?
Yeah, we've been on consensus bearish euro for some time. This is a scenario that we think we'll see in the fourth quarter. In the fourth quarter, the Fed will be much more explicit about when it intends to start tapering. It will be sometime around the turn of the year, maybe early next year. Around the same time, we're expecting the ECB to actually expand its QE program as part of its framework review announcement. If something gets FX moving, it's policy divergence. And here you'll have one central bank that's ending QE and another central bank that's expanding QE. So we think that there's downside on euro dollar, and that's not really been a consensus view.